On January 28th, federal employees received a weird email with the subject line "Fork in the Road." It advised employees that if you choose to remain in your current position, we thank you for your renewed focus on serving the American people to the best of your abilities and look forward to working together as part of an improved federal workforce. Aw, that's really nice. But the email told employees that they could look forward to, quote, return to in-person work 5 days a week, forced relocations, and higher performance standards. The government then offered everyone the opportunity to resign. Quote, if you resign under this program, you will retain all pay and benefits regardless of your daily workload and will be exempted from all applicable in-person work requirements until September 30th, 2025, or earlier if you choose to accelerate your resignation for any reason. Responses to the email ranged from confused to the spoon emoji, look that one up, or to, quote, they may take our telework, but they'll never take our freedom. And federal employees generally refused to believe the fork in the road email was real and not an elaborate phishing attack. So the OPM recalibrated and sent out a second email answering frequently asked questions such as, can I take an extended vacation while on administrative leave? The answer was, quote, you are most welcome, stay at home and relax or to travel to your dream destination, whatever you would like. But understandably, the grammatical errors only reinforced the perception that this was a fake email probably written by ChatGPT. This prompted the OPM team to send a third email the next day with the subject line, no really, the fork in the road email is real, it's an actual government communication, not Nigeria, we swear. Followed by, quote, guys, these emails are not phishing attacks, these are genuine emails from your very real bosses. You can actually respond to them. Feel free to send us your social security number and banking records. We will only use that information for your benefit. Surprisingly, that didn't do the trick either. So on day 4, the OPM sent an email with the subject line, no work, full pay, and said, hello, we are government. Want to retire early? Click yes now. So on day 5, the OPM decided to change tack by sending an email with a subject line that read, fire emoji, hot jobs in your area, fire emoji. But federal employees were still skeptical. So the OPM responded with a final plea with the subject line, we are trying to reach you about your job's extended warranty. Surprisingly, uptake was not what they expected. Okay, so those last few were not real emails, but it's still hard to believe that any of these emails were real in the first place. We truly are in the worst timeline. Now to talk about this complete cluster is chaos lawyer Liz Dye.
Thanks, Devin. On November 12th, just a week after winning the election, Donald Trump announced that the great Elon Musk, working in conjunction with American patriot Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Get it? He's naming a government department after a crypto meme coin? Yeah, no wonder that dog looks so disappointed. Trump described it as potentially the Manhattan Project of our time and promised that DOGE would drive out the massive waste and fraud which exists throughout our annual $6.5 trillion of government spending. DOGE's first act of efficiency was to cut Ramaswamy, who was sent packing with instructions to go run for governor of Ohio or something. As originally conceived, DOGE would provide advice and guidance from outside of government, and maybe that was a head fake, or maybe the plan was reconfigured post-election to avoid open records laws. Recent reporting by 404 Media suggests that Musk is maneuvering DOGE to avoid freedom of information laws so that no one will be able to see what he's doing. But whatever the reason, on the day of Trump's inauguration, he signed an executive order renaming the United States Digital Service as the Department of Government Efficiency and essentially replacing it with Musk and his minions. Previously, the digital service had worked to improve user interface on government websites. As DOGE, it's become a vehicle for Musk to do to the United States government what he did to Twitter. But the federal government is not a private company, and so Musk has run into 100 or 200 wee tiny legal issues. On October 26, 2022, Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, strutted into the company's headquarters carrying a plumbing fixture. Get it? Let that sink in. Among Musk's first actions was to send an email to Twitter employees with the subject line, a fork in the road, instructing them that going forward to build a breakthrough Twitter 2.0 and succeed in an increasingly competitive world, we will need to be extremely hardcore. This will mean working long hours at high intensity. Only exceptional performance will constitute a passing grade. The email instructed employees to click on a link if they were down to be extremely hardcore. If not, they would be deemed terminated within 24 hours and given 3 months severance pay. Within a year of Musk's takeover, Twitter's workforce had been cut by 80%, and the value of the company declined by roughly the same percentage. As the Grand Vizier of DOGE, Musk is hoping to do the same thing for the federal government. On January 28th, the Office of Personnel Management, essentially the HR department for the executive branch, sent an email with the subject line, fork in the road, to roughly 2.3 million government employees. The email invited them to tender their resignations, and although it made no reference to requiring federal bureaucrats to be extremely hardcore, the implication was clear. And in case it wasn't, Musk pinned a fork in the road tweet to his profile. The email cited an executive order Trump signed on his first day in office mandating a return to 5 days of in-person work for all government employees. And it referred to, quote, meaningful consolidation and divestitures potentially resulting in physical office relocations for a number of federal workers. Translation, we're cutting staff and you better get out while the getting is good. If you're lucky, you'll find yourself transferred from Baltimore, Maryland to Butte, Montana. And if you're unlucky, we're going to fire you anyway.
Sorry to interrupt, Liz, but if you're going to try to fire the entire federal workforce, you're probably going to want a good workers' compensation lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, let my law firm, the Eagle Team, help. If you need a workers' comp lawyer, if you've gotten in a car crash, or if you've suffered a data breach, especially if you got one of those data breach letters saying that your information might have been leaked, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. It's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can maximize your recovery. And by the way, we don't get paid unless you do, so there's nothing up front. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number that's on screen right now for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team.
The email warned of a new performance culture designed to reward and promote those that exceed expectations and address in a fair and open way those who do not meet the high standards which the taxpayers of this country have a right to demand. In case that was too subtle, it said that the majority of federal agencies are likely to be downsized through restructurings, realignments, and reductions in force. And to drive the point home even further, it warned that employees needed to be loyal and promised enhanced standards of suitability and conduct as we move forward.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Then, having told all these employees that they were likely to be kicked to the curb, the email went on to offer the opportunity to resign in advance with a departure date of September 30th and then work from home, or not, while collecting full pay for 7 months. All they had to do was send an email with the subject line "resign" from their government email accounts by February 6th. The Fork in the Road email linked to an FAQ that painted a rosy picture of the paradise awaiting federal employees who would just click resign and clean out their desks. They wouldn't have to work at all during the 7-month period. They could go on vacation, spend time with the kids, or just sit home and watch Netflix in their underwear. Or they could go out and get another job. In fact, the FAQ encouraged them to promote American prosperity by, quote, moving from lower productivity jobs in the public sector to higher productivity jobs in the private sector. Lord grant us all the confidence of a Silicon Valley tech bro telling millions of career government employees to go do something productive with their lives in the private sector. As at Twitter, that Fork in the Road email prompted some questions, particularly since most federal employees enjoy civil service protections and belong to unions, which might make them difficult to fire immediately and without cause. So a member of Musk's entourage named Stephanie Holmes showed up at Doge and announced herself to be the new HR rep for the agency. In a meeting which immediately leaked to Wired magazine, she told the confused staffers that we believe the offer is lawful, and she promised to circle back on the actual agreement to be signed if federal employees took Doge up on it. The FAQ yada-yada'd over the issue of a binding agreement, instructing employees to sign away their rights in a binding contract and then wait for the agency to execute paperwork reflecting all the terms. Holmes said, you know, I think the information you're going to have about this is available to you right now, and again, you're just going to have to make a personal decision based on the information that's available to you right now. That's not super reassuring if you're being asked to quit your job based on a vague email and a handful of magic beans. And when the promised contract finally appeared, it failed to put those fears to rest. Or, as the National Labor Relations Board union put it, the contract appears to be drafted by AI or LegalZoom. And when a lawyer tells you that your contract looks like it was drafted by AI, they do not mean that as a compliment. The February 4th memo from Acting Director of OPM Charles Ezell purported to explain why concerns regarding the program's legality are misplaced and offer clarifying guidance on certain aspects of the plan. The memo shrugged off federal conflict of interest laws, which would normally prevent government employees from getting a job in the same sector while on Uncle Sam's payroll. Ezell promised that it was fine, really, because if you take them up on the offer, you'll be on administrative leave, so there won't be any conflict. That's cool, bro, except that the contract doesn't guarantee that any employee who accepts the deferred resignation will actually be on leave. It says employees shall not be expected to work during the deferred resignation period except in rare circumstances as determined by the agency. What's rare? I don't know, but it sure sounds like your boss can call you back into service at any time. A lawsuit filed by 4 federal labor unions representing 800,000 government employees highlighted some other problems with this offer. First of all, the executive branch can only spend money appropriated for it by Congress. The OPM buyout pinky promises to continue paying the employees who accept it through September. But the current budget expires on March 14th, which means that OPM is making a contract to spend money it does not have. And that violates something called the Anti-Deficiency Act, which says that the executive branch cannot enter into a contract or obligation for payment of money before an appropriation is made unless authorized by law. The OPM buyout offer may also violate the Administrative Procedure Act by adopting an arbitrary deadline of February 6, forcing millions of government workers to make a serious life decision within a week under threat of being fired if they choose wrong. Other critics suggest that the OPM contract violates 5 U.S.C. Section 6329A, which provides that, during any calendar year, an agency may place an employee in administrative leave for a period of not more than a total of 10 work days. OPM says employees will be on admin leave from March 1 to September 30th. Under Section 3523, voluntary separation payments, that is, employee buyouts, are capped at $25,000, which is less than the 6-month salary OPM is promising to pay these people. And under Section 3522, before any agency, quote, obligates any resources for voluntary separation incentive payments, that is, makes a buyout offer, the head of each agency shall submit to the Office of Personnel Management a plan outlining the intended use of such incentive payments and a proposed organizational chart for the agency once such incentive payments have been completed. These guys just sent an email to 2.3 million government employees and told them to take the deal or get fired. But that's not the worst problem with this contract. Check out paragraph 13. It says, employee forever waives and will not pursue through any judicial, administrative, or other process any action against the agency that is based on, arising from, or related to employee's employment. So by signing this, you give up your right to sue your employer for any violation. If the government takes you off administrative leave and assigns you to an office 500 miles from your house or stops paying you at all, you have zero recourse. But the government can tear the whole thing up at any time, and there's nothing you can do about it. It says this agreement cannot be rescinded except in the sole discretion of the agency head, which shall not be subject to review at the Merit Systems Protection Board or any other forum, and waives all rights to challenge the resignation before the Merit Systems Protection Board or any other forum. So if you sign this thing and they violate it, you are SOL. And so, it's hardly surprising, not a lot of people did. In the end, only about 75,000 employees took OPM's offer, about 3% of the people who received the email. Even though a federal judge in Massachusetts extended the deadline to opt in for 4 extra days, the number of takers for this fabulous offer was less than the regular annual rate of attrition for federal employees, which is about 6%. So it looks from the outside like the only people interested were probably on their way out the door already and took a flyer on getting a paid vacation as a parting gift. But marching in and trying to gut the federal workforce wasn't the only parallel to the takeover of Twitter.
Thanks, Liz. As you mentioned, public sector employees' unions challenged the buyout in court, and a federal judge originally halted the fork-in-the-road federal buyout program, that's not really a buyout program, from taking effect until someone could figure out what was going on. The court originally stated, quote, in compliance with an order issued today by the District Court of Massachusetts granting a request to stay the deadline for the deferred resignation program, the deadline for federal employees to accept the program is being extended to Monday, February 10th at 11:59 p.m. By that time, about 65,000 employees had accepted the buyout offer, or about 3% of the federal workforce, which seemed to be about in line with just normal attrition rates. But after the hearing on February 10th, Judge O'Toole ruled that the government could move forward with the deferred resignation program. He found that the plaintiffs failed to establish a likelihood of success on the merits, which is a key requirement for injunctive relief, but it was largely on procedural rather than substantive grounds. First, he found that the plaintiffs lacked standing. To establish standing to bring a lawsuit, a plaintiff must demonstrate 3 elements under Article 3 of the Constitution: injury in fact, causation, and redressability. The most important factor there is generally injury in fact, meaning that the plaintiff has to show concrete, particularized, and actual or imminent injury that is not hypothetical or speculative. And in this case, the unions had failed to show standing because they were not directly impacted by the fork-in-the-road directive. While the employees themselves had injuries, the unions would have needed to demonstrate direct harm, such as immediate impact on their ability to collective bargain or clear unavoidable loss of membership or financial resources tied directly to the directive. But the court observed that with respect to the unions, even, quote, a loss of membership dues to the unions is not certain before the September 30th deadline. But additionally, the district district court found that it lacked subject matter jurisdiction because the dispute fell under the Federal Service Labor Management Relations Statute, or FSL-MRS, and the Civil Service Reform Act, or the CSRA, which provide exclusive procedures for resolving federal employment disputes. Quote, according to this complex scheme, disputes must first be administratively exhausted before the employing agency and the relevant administrative review board, and any further challenges are properly heard in a court of appeals. The two APA claims alleged in this case are the type of challenges Congress intended for review within the statutory scheme, which provides for administrative and judicial review. The court emphasized that administrative review processes must be exhausted before judicial intervention. This is a common process known as exhaustion of administrative remedies. Quote, aggrieved employees can bring claims through the administrative process. That the unions themselves may be foreclosed from this administrative process does not mean the adequate judicial review is lacking. So effectively, there's no decision on the merits in this particular case. That'll have to go through the administrative process first. And the temporary restraining order was dissolved, and the plaintiff's request for further preliminary relief was denied. And that's at least judicially how these things are supposed to work. The TROs are emergency motions to preserve the status quo, and then you move on to the preliminary injunction. Here, the judge felt that there likely was not sufficient standing, so he didn't grant the PI. But the door is open for the employees individually to sue on their own through the administrative process. So likely we haven't heard the last of this particular issue. Now, it's particularly interesting to see how the media is handling this developing story, because ideological bias seems to be telling two completely different stories. A whopping 557 sources covered the fork in the road email and the attached not a buyout, with 50% of the reporting coming from the center, 25% from the right, and 25% coming from the left. On the right, sources praise Trump for a masterstroke that will save the US billions by trimming bloated government payrolls, by eliminating lazy civil servants, with headlines on the left framing the move as a cruel joke and the Muskification of the government, while highlighting pleas from Democratic politicians and union leaders for workers to not take the deal. And meanwhile, in the center, the most common word used in the headlines is buyout, which is its own type of bias, which reinforces the belief that the government is a private party or that the government has the power to do what it's doing. Now, the headlines you read first have immense power to shape how you understand the news. And that's why I like to see the news from as many angles as I can, which I can do with the help of today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. And right now they're offering LegalEagle viewers 40% off their unlimited access Vantage subscription. You can scan the QR code or use the link in the description to get a discount for a limited time. Because Ground News gathers related articles from around the world and across the political spectrum, so you can see the bias and compare coverage. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. One of my favorite parts is their bias comparison feature, which highlights specific differences in reporting across the political spectrum. This can be especially helpful when reading stories from sources you've never heard of, where there's no telling who owns it or what agenda they might have. I also love their blind spot feature, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. Like this recent story that was ignored by right-leaning sources explaining how Trump's lax enforcement of the rules of government are dismantling the guardrails set up to ensure public trust. This type of analysis helps explain why we often talk past each other and why some people seem hyper-focused on what to others seems like nonsense or fake news. But all this is why Ground News is my favorite way to get the news. And as a legal eaglet, you can save 40% off the Ground News Vantage subscription by scanning the code on screen or clicking on the link down below. This subscription gives you unlimited access to every feature, including the Bias Insight tool and blind spot feed. And by subscribing, you'll support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. So click below or scan the code today. And after that, click on this link over here for more LegalEagle, or I'll see you in court.